The cloud, okay. Okay, we are recording. Well, hello and welcome everyone. My name is Janie Nolan and I am the Executive Director of the American Avalanche Association. And I wanted to take some time before we introduce our panel tonight to thank the people who have supported A3 and have made this webinar possible. So the folks you see on your screen now have made our entire winter webinar series possible and really keep A3 up and running. So I hope as you consider shopping in the industry, you will support the folks who support A3. And with that, I want to introduce our host tonight, Jenna Malone. Jenna currently works at Alta Ski Area as a part-time ski patroller. She also works at Powderbird Heli Skiing as a tail guide, and she's an instructor for the American Avalanche Institute. On top of all of that, Jenna is a PA in neurosurgery, trauma, and critical care at the Intermountain Medical Center in Utah. Jenna has spent multiple seasons on Denali as a medical provider for Denali Rescue Volunteers, and she has presented at snow and avalanche workshops in Utah, Wyoming, and Oregon. So needless to say, when we began exploring the idea for a women lead webinar, Jenna was an obvious pick to host. So Jenna, thank you for your participation thus far and for all you've done to get this panel put together. And with that, I will turn it over to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Janie. And thank you to A3 for inviting me to moderate this panel. I'm so excited to actually get to spend most of the evening with some women that I admire so much and fortunately are also good friends. So I'm going to introduce each of them in no particular order. So Melis, Cody, and Melis, will you raise your hand? There she is. So Melis is the executive director of the Alaska Avalanche School, and each winter works with a talented crew of 4 staff and 43 different instructors. She's training Alaskans and her staff are training Alaskans to avoid avalanche hazards with tuition-free Know Before You Go programs, affordable recreational and professional avalanche safety courses. From Nome to Ketchikan and places in between, Melis is a huge advocate of local avalanche education. Previously, and when I was lucky to meet Melis, she has worked as a high altitude mountaineering guide and technical search and rescue member in Denali National Park. And today she splits her time between Yosemite, California, Anchorage, Alaska, and frequently is transitioning between her climbing shoes and climbing skins. Melis, thank you for being here. And before I actually introduce the rest of the panelists, I just wanted to say there is the opportunity to ask questions throughout the evening. Probably after each topic, we'll look and answer some of those. And then if they're not answered during the presentation, then we will try to get to them at the end. And Janie, the executive director of A3, is going to be helping to make sure that those are answered. So thank you, Janie. And also just wanted to highlight the inclusiveness of the evening. Obviously this is titled Women Lead, but we're very happy that we know many of our male colleagues are here, and we want to welcome everyone to this evening. So. Next up, I have Tina Biddle, who I've known for almost 20 years. Tina is the director of the Ski Patrol at Snowbird. In the summer months, she works in the Colorado high country and also guides international trekking trips. She's a career outdoors woman. She's worked as a commercial river guide, as a Breckenridge ski patroller, as a snowbird ski patroller, and now director, and as a mountain bike guide. And I have tried keeping up with Tina on my mountain bike in various parts of the world. She has explored much of the world because she's passionate about travel and loves Italy, Turkey, Thailand, New Zealand. Those are some of her favorites. She's also lived in Chamonix, France, as part of the Snowbird Grand Montée ski patrol exchange program. So learn to be a ski patroller in another language as well. So Tina, thank you so much for being here tonight. Next, we have Roz Reynolds. Roz grew up in Boise, Idaho, and now lives in Boulder, Colorado, where she works full-time for VEASAN. And it is VEASAN. W is pronounced like a V in Swiss. Say it with me, VEASAN, Avalanche Control. And Roz is a civil engineer by education, and then spent some time after university being a skiing and climbing bum, guiding glacier travel in Alaska, and backcountry skiing around Avon and Biddle, Colorado. When VEASAN had a booth at the 2016 International Snow Science Workshop in Breckenridge, Colorado, where Roz was a volunteer, she connected with them, and then they later reached out to her and hired her to set up their business in the US. A huge undertaking for anyone, but especially, as Roz put it, for someone with zero business background. She jumped into the fire and learned about applying for federal and state licenses for explosives work, anchor design for the 12-shot VEASAN towers, now used by various highway and ski resort forecasting teams in the Western US, including 21 in Little Cottonwood Canyon alone, with 11 more to be added this summer. And then Roz is an avid skier, whitewater rafter, and climber in her free time. Roz, thank you for being here tonight. And then Brooke Shiny Edwards has worked in the ski and avalanche industry for more than 2 decades. Brooke first received her Avalanche Level 1 certification from the Alaska Avalanche School in 1997 at Hatcher's Pass. And it was that course that prompted her to move to Alaska full time. Since then, Brooke's been engaged in the Avalanche community as a board member for Friends of the Two Dutch National Forest Avalanche Information Center, as a NOLS instructor, as an avalanche educator at the Alaska Avalanche School and the Alaska Guide Collective, as a backcountry ski guide and forecaster in Japan and Alaska, and as a heli ski guide for Valdez Heli Ski Guides. Brooke's also a very talented writer and has contributed and been featured in multiple pieces in the Avalanche Review, Powder Magazine, Backcountry, Free Skier, Off Piste, and more. Brooke, thank you so much for being here. And I think Brooke probably has the best costume collection of anyone I know. So.
And I'm wearing my unicorns.
Oh yeah, excellent, excellent, very good. All right. So the dictionary definition of imposter syndrome is the persistent inability to believe that one's success is deserved or has been legitimately achieved as a result of one's own efforts or skills. It was termed in 1978 by a study of high achieving women by a couple of psychologists, Pauline Rose Clamp and Suzanne Imes. And another way I've heard it expressed is just everyone else thinks that you have got it going on in your life as a success, but you can't quite internalize that feeling. You feel like you've fooled everyone into thinking that you have it together. And there's a writer, Alex Levitin, who said, imposter syndrome is the price people with normal human emotions and self-doubt pay for challenging or stretching themselves. And so she says, actually, you should be congratulated because you're brave and not a sociopath. The upside of imposter syndrome, on that note, could be that it makes us work harder and be on top of our game more. It makes us push our competence over our confidence in the avalanche world, which is likely a very positive thing. Having a high skill level and a sense of humility can keep us alive in the mountains, right? But the downside is that in several studies, it's clearly been linked to burnout, stress, and anxiety, all of which can eventually very negatively affect our decision-making in the mountains and our health and happiness. The opposite of imposter syndrome is something called the Dunning-Kruger effect, where confidence far outweighs competence. Said one psychologist, the only thing worse than always questioning your abilities is never questioning them. And again, it's easy for us to think about how this approach could get us killed in avalanche terrain. Anyone can experience imposter syndrome, but studies show that underrepresented groups experience it more. And in the snow and avalanche industry, those groups include people who identify as female, BIPOC, or Black, Indigenous, and people of color, persons with disabilities, the list goes on. So I've asked these 4 very high achieving women to share examples of a time where they felt like an imposter. And then in the interest of trying to help all of us learn from this, I've asked them also to think about some tools that might help. And I think it's fair to say that there's also been a lot of talk recently about not actually fixing individuals with imposter syndrome, but trying to create a culture that makes imposter syndrome less likely. There was a Harvard Business Review article written by Rishika Tulsian and Jodi Ambury that was titled "Stop Telling Women They Have Imposter Syndrome." And the gist of the article is just that we need to work on a workplace and a culture that's more inclusive overall. So Tina, if you'd be willing to start, I'd love for you to share a story about when you felt like an imposter.
Many times in my future job, or my current job. You know, when I started ski patrolling in 1997 in Breckenridge, I never thought that I would be where I am. And there's definitely days where I'm like, how did I get here? Why am I here? How did I deserve this? How am I capable enough to be in this position? So there's definitely been a few times, more than a few times over the last 5 years since I've been the ski patrol director, 5 years, where I'm like, okay, do I need to be doing something else? Should I step down? So, yeah.
And how do you get past that?
Because, well, for one, I just have to get through the season because I don't want to leave everyone hanging for the middle of the season. But I have a great crew. And so I don't feel like I'm the patrol director. I'm just helping them complete the tasks. And I'm one of the team. And, you know, I kind of forget that I'm the patrol director at some points until, you know, there's some stressful situations where I have to make the decision. It's like, oh my gosh, what am I doing? And I try to make the decision with the best information that I have and go from there.
That's awesome. I think I would guess that being part of the team or feeling that you're part of the team and just trying to forget that you're the director actually buys you a lot of respect from your crew because they see that you're doing the work also, and that you're one of them, right? So, which is I mean, we'll talk more about leadership styles, but I think like having that sense of humility is one of the best qualities in a leader that we can have. Melis, how about you?
Yeah, I'm trying to understand, that balance between the things that keep me humble and in check, or the things that I do to get prepared for a hard assignment, and the difference between that and over preparing for an assignment or a task. And, anytime I try something that's hard for me or new for me, especially in what's traditionally a really male space, you feel like there's extra eyes on you. And that can make performing well really difficult. A standout moment for me was being part of a technical rescue team, was doing, helicopter related rescue and short haul rescue. And, it was something I hadn't had much experience with. I felt like I had, the skill. They call them dopes on a rope, or that's at least what you hear people say to each other. And it's like, well, I can dangle from a carabiner and clip somebody else to one. But then you show up to work and the flight suit's 3 times too big and the helmet's this big and you can't hear anybody. And you go home with a headache every night because you couldn't hear anything. And then the helicopter pilot tells you you're talking twice as much as your male colleagues. And I start ticking off literally the number of words each person on the heli team's talking. And I'm not talking more. I'm just talking 100% more than they've heard any female talk in the last 10 years. So it seems like a lot more. So you're trying to do all the things in kind of and amplified situation. Like it can be high stress, it's high consequence. You need good teamwork, good decision making, a lot of trust. But then it's like you have to do that, overcoming all these things and still perform as well or better. And that's kind of exhausting and frustrating sometimes.
Yeah, I think that's where the anxiety and the burnout and the potential for decreased job performance can come from. Brooke, can you share an example?
Yeah, I loved Tina saying it, because I feel like that too is like, it's not like there's one example, it's like something that comes into play like constantly. It's not like you arrive at this stage in our lives and you're like, I did it, I overcame imposter syndrome, I'll never have to feel like that again. It's like, no, it's a constant woven throughout. And it's like, as you said, Jenna, we're just trying to add more tools to the toolbox, and having conversations and webinars like these to me are the foundation of creating the culture that we're talking about, right? So I've super struggled with this on my path, and I'm incredibly honored to be here on this panel. And one instance that comes to mind is I got hired to be a backcountry guide in Japan, and I hadn't actually technically ever had the job as a backcountry ski guide yet. I'd been guiding groups in avalanche terrain through being an avalanche instructor, and that gave me a lot of the tools to take people safely through avalanche terrain and manage risk for people on a team. So I threw my name in the hat through a friend to get hired in Japan, and they looked at my resume and they told me I was hired to be the forecaster for the guide company as well as a backcountry guide. And I was like, I've never been to Japan. And I was like, oh my God, what did I write on my resume? Like, I'm screwed, And I was just so nervous and showed up, and everybody who worked with me was male. And so I'm the new girl, had never worked there, was the only new person. Only one of maybe 3 Americans. Everybody else was like from France, Spain, Finland, Sweden, New Zealand, Australia. So they pretty much like threw me in the fire, and there's no weather stations near there. So I was like learning weather models and trying to figure it out and picking other guides' brains. But then like day one was like leading guide meeting of a team of international men in a zone I'd never been to, in 2 jobs I'd never done before in my life. And I was like talk about anxiety, right? I was like, they're gonna find out I don't know anything. And then lucky for me, Japan's like pretty, like it just snows 20 centimeters every day, always at, it's the same temperature. And it was where I was that year. And so I was like, storm slab? Looks like there might be some wind slab up high, ski the trees, and I got my way through somehow. And it, I did have a lot of allyship amongst the men there, and made them my team. I will get to leadership style later, but I was like, I'm not gonna be able to do this alone. I'm not gonna fake it till I make it. I'm gonna like pick everybody's brain. The guy who's been here 20 years, I'm gonna, that guy looks really good at weather science. I'm gonna put him on lining me out with this. And so I just kind of like went in there and like was, okay, I need all of you to contribute to this meeting, because it's not just me with the answers. So I want it to be a discussion, and it worked out amazingly well. And it was like a, but I easily could have just stopped myself from stepping into the room. And it ended up being like one of the great successes of my life. And I learned so much from putting myself in that space. And a lot of it was because I had like an incredible team, and they were wonderful to work with. So Tina, like you, that team is like huge. And I would say that is a tool that stayed in my toolbox for a long time, I think.
Awesome. That actually reminds me of Roz, when you and I talked about this, you had a pretty specific example of imposter syndrome that came to mind. And I think like one of your tools that you talked about was just verbalizing it. Can you talk about that, about what your experience was, where you felt that way?
Yeah, so and I kind of echo what everyone said, that it's not, imposter syndrome isn't one thing that happens one day and then goes away the next day. It's definitely something that you keep experiencing and working with and working through. But a specific example for me that we talked about was I just took my Pro 2 Avalanche course. And before and during the course, I felt a lot of pressure to perform well. Working as an Avalanche professional, I felt that if I didn't pass the course, I'd be a failure and that I'd be looked down upon. I felt this way even though my peers saw me as experienced with the curriculum in the course. And what really helped me was just support and teamwork from others in the course, and as well as the instructors. And actually every day we talked about the stress continuum, and we said, what level are we today? And we just had that up front and had a discussion about it. And it was okay to say, like, you know, today I'm feeling yellow, like I am feeling a bit stressed out. Or oh, maybe today, like I'm starting to go back to green. So I think this is a really helpful tool that we can use to work through this. And I also think that when we are in an atmosphere of like a pass-fail course or competitive sports, or even in the workplace, we can tend to compete with each other a little bit, and maybe we see the shortcomings or mishaps of others, unfortunately. And I think it's really helpful, particularly in a competitive environment or stressful atmosphere, to look around and just see each other as really talented, capable, strong individuals, and work together as a community to support each other and to listen to each other and be that support to people who are feeling imposter syndrome.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Roz. I think lifting each other up in those moments of stress, even though sometimes it's not the most intuitive, because I think we can tend to turn inward when we're feeling self-critical. But I think lifting each other up can help set up the whole team for success, and that it'll come back to you. I think Jeannie has a poll ready for us that I would love the audience to engage with. Jeannie, could you put that up? So, have you experienced imposter syndrome in your career? Yes, no, or I'm not sure. Okay, and do we have those responses? 100%. Okay. I think I had guessed earlier that it would be upwards of 90. So wow, a perfect poll. Great. Any other tools that you all think could help? I think, as Brooke, you were saying, just having webinars like this or conversations, I think naming it and normalizing it is really helpful. And then any other thoughts?
I think that transparency of like where you're at and feeling then allows other people to see you as human, and then they're like, oh my God, I'm feeling that too, and that creates community. So kind of like what Roz was saying about the stress continuum, I've loved that our industry is like using that tool so much more and making it okay to say out loud. Because I just this past year had just realized like how stress injured I was, and it was a compilation of a lot of things, and just to have that community that we can start to speak the same language. And I found that in my most anxiety and stressed out moments, if I'm just transparent, if I just say out loud, even if I'm like in a leadership role, to say like, I'm having a hard time right now, like, then people just like that melts people into their own humanity, to recognize you as human, to say like, oh my gosh, you are too, like I feel like that as well. And then that teamwork kind of comes together to buoy up. But if you suck it up and deal and swallow it and try to like be tough and strong because you think that's what people need, then you're gonna blockade yourself from that support system that's maybe right in your circle already, like right there, and maybe all they needed was to hear you say like, I'm a yellow, or I'm an orange, or I'm scared to put on my Wonder Woman bracelets today and get in the helicopter.
We had a great comment actually from Lynn Wolf, who I consider a mentor in my life as an Avalanche professional. And she's just complimenting Roz and echoing her thoughts, and just said, I just worked my very first Pro 2, went in very open-eyed, asked a ton of people for their take on things, but I realized my job wasn't to own all the answers, but to make a central safe room to ask and answer what questions would come up. So Brooke, exactly what you were saying, I think. Great. And I think I'm gonna close that down. Okay, great. So moving on, we're gonna talk a little bit about leadership. I think there can be a lot of different leadership styles. And I think in the past, we've used masculine and feminine to describe certain types of leadership. But I think, in the interest of inclusivity, we've started to move away from that and tried to use more gender neutral terms like authoritative, consensus building, coaching, direct. And so I know all of you have been leaders in various parts of your life, and you've probably employed a lot of different styles. Brooke, can you talk a little bit about your leadership style and how you've arrived at that?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've been alluding to it in everything I've said. Of that, I'm very much a collaborative leader, and even when I'm like guiding or like completely like in that position of there's, it's not just colleagues, but it's like, okay, these people are paying you to make all the decisions for them. Even in that situation, my opening safety briefing is like, we're all going to be a team. Like, we're going in the wilderness together, whether it's for a day or 2 weeks. And I need us all to have shift our mindset right now to be that we are going to look out for each other. Like, because I'm just but one human, and I need you all to look out for me, and I'm going to look out for you. And obviously I'm going to have the final say when it comes to risk and safety, but I want you all to have a voice, and you have veto power. If you ever feel like there's a situation that I'm creating that you feel unsafe, like, please speak up. And so I just lay the groundwork right away as like, let's be a team. I feel like I often just I would always choose to co-guide with people or, lead from a teamwork is dreamwork type of place. Because I just feel like I'm a out loud brainstormer, and the first thing that comes out of my mouth isn't always the best idea, but I'm doing it because I want to spur an idea in somebody else, and then maybe they build on something else, and then the fourth idea is maybe what is the best plan. But if I hold all that on my shoulders and I just spit out my first idea and we go with it, it's like I think we'd miss out on the ripeness of how essentially amazing that plan could be in the end, or rounder or more holistic or more inclusive, with more minds working on the problem. So I certainly have the capacity to be directive, but I tend to reserve that for when it's really needed. And I think because I've come from this collaborative place, my clients or friends or co-guides, everybody pays right attention if I'm all of a sudden you need to do this. They're like, whoa, she never does that, but it's like when that is called for, I can go to that place, but it's always my safety voice. You gotta be safe. Listen to me.
I like the safety voice. Awesome. Roz, you pulled a permit for the Grand Canyon. I think it was several years ago, and said you had to learn a lot about leadership and different styles in a short amount of time. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. So I applied to go rafting down the Grand Canyon. My first time I applied, I won. So I was very lucky. People go many years without winning. And then I was tasked with setting up this group of people to go down Grand Canyon. And I learned a lot from that. Before I went on the trip, I did a lot of preparation and I got everything ready to go. And I was like, okay, now we're going to go on the river and my work is done, and how wrong I was, as soon as you as soon as we were on the river, there were so many decisions to be made and so many people wanting different things. And what I learned was that we need to, sometimes you need to talk to the whole group and be democratic and maybe vote on what you're going to do. But sometimes you need a decision maker and you need to be like, we're going to do this. This is what we're going to do. So it's kind of about finding that balance sometimes. And I've learned a lot by trial by fire, and I'm still learning and growing. And I think part of being a good leader is to constantly be learning and improving. And I really think that leading by example is important. And I also think that it's really underrated. Being a good follower is really underrated. And that it's an important skill to be both, to be able to be a leader in the moment, but also be a good follower when somebody else is taking the reins as well.
Yeah, that's great. And I think you've mentioned before that as a good leader and a good mentor, you want to actually give authority to the people who are following you, give them the opportunity to make mistakes as well. So I think that's a sign of a confident and competent leader. Melis, I know in your work with the Park Service, you have to go through several checklists when you guys are responding to rescues. How do you think you've evolved as a leader through your various roles? Oh, you're muted.
I
There
thought
you
I
go.
had, there we go. I think I seek out the types of leadership that play to my strengths, which is definitely delegative. I like working in teams on complex tasks, and everybody has a narrowly defined role. You make sure they have the tools to that role. Like you all go and do it and you circle back and you see how you did. So that's how I roll. That's my preferred. But I think in order to be like a transformative leader and a full leader, you need to dabble in everything. You know, Brooke said, yeah, you know, this is my safety voice, but take what your default is and you need to play with all the other ones, because as you get more and more responsibility, that one method isn't going to get you somewhere, or it's going to get you a really homogenous group. And I recognize that in myself is if I'm not actively coaching people and reaching out and challenging people and giving them tools and doing the check-ins and having that voice, then you're going to miss those members of your team that's going to make it richer and fuller and better. If you're not collaborating on projects that involve a lot of risk and a lot of hard work, you're not going to have buy-in. And so you have to dabble in it all. You're definitely going to have your default. You can corner yourself career-wise in a way that only speaks to the way that you're most comfortable with, but you're going to stall out at a level and not be able to go past if you don't dip into both communication styles that you're not comfortable with and leadership styles you're not comfortable with.
Do you think that you've, when you identify a communication style or leadership style that you're not comfortable with, do you have tools for how to improve your work in those areas? Or do you just name them?
Yeah, I've seen other people communicate a certain way, like, and being an Avalanche instructor's an excellent example. Like we have some instructors at Avalanche School, they teach really well through these like long, elaborate stories. And that's, you think that takes a personality, a certain skill set. But if that's not your default and you wrote down and you thought of an illustrative story and you tried it sometime, it would feel really uncomfortable. It wouldn't feel natural. But you would connect with an audience in the way you never have before. And it's going to take work. It's going to take preparation. Same thing, use of humor. You might be a really dry person and you think, oh, that's too slapstick. That's too corny. But people connect with stories. They connect with humor. It helps them learn. And so that's the nice thing when you work with other people. You don't want to say, well, I'm the person that's really good at just explaining like fracture mechanics. And so I'm going to do that in every level too from now on. You want to do make sure you're teaching human factors or doing things that's like a little outside your comfort zone so that you're a fuller instructor. And it'll let you to take on something different. Like Lynn was saying, like my first Pro 2, I was maybe holding myself off for those types of lectures, those topics, because I know how much more work it is for me to prepare like a whole new set and go to this next level.
I think that's great advice. Tina, I know that you are often faced with, or not, hopefully not often, but earlier this season, I know you were faced with some critical decision-making moments when we had a pretty, well, we still do, unfortunately, have a persistent weak layer in the Wasatch. That seems to be the story of our snowpack this year, but early season, I know you were experiencing some close calls, and I would imagine that your leadership skills felt like they were being tested. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. Luckily I have a great team that was around to throw ideas off of and bounce ideas off of. And most of the time, luckily, it's never just me. It's like I have someone to talk to and we make a decision together. And whether it be, Kami in the snow safety or Kent, who's the assistant director, it's like I have great people to talk to, be like, okay, what should we do? And there's so many different ways to look at something. And yeah, it was quite interesting early season. But you do the best with all the information you have, and that's all you can do. And you try and gather as much information, you make the decision, and it works or it doesn't. And if it doesn't work, we hopefully learn from it. And I definitely have learned from incidences that we had earlier this season and, last summer. And yeah, it definitely helps to talk about it. And, you have these experiences and you put them back in your toolbox and you save them for maybe when it happens the next time, you can be like, oh yeah, let's think about this one. What makes the most sense? Let's ask these questions of the people that are on scene of the incident and remember what worked and what didn't. Or, we always debrief after an incident and what could we have done better? How could we have made this? How did it go really well? And how did it go not so well? So.
Yeah, I think that's a really key part of leadership also. You said you make the best decision that you can with the information that you have at the time, but then you're also taking the opportunity to look back and see what you could have done differently. And hopefully that helps you feel less challenged when a similar situation comes up, or you at least have that familiarity with it. I have a question that came up. Actually, I'm going to revert to imposter syndrome subject, and it was directed at you, Tina. Do you ever feel like you have to perform even better, or that your performance is more critical being a woman versus a male ski patrol director? And I guess I would posit that to all the panelists. Have you felt like you're being watched any more closely in your roles as guides or as business directors or as leaders because you're female rather than male?
I've thought about that very infrequently. I do my job and it is what it is. And I'm hoping that if I wasn't doing something right, that I would hear about it, whether I'm male or female. I don't know. I haven't really felt like I need to act any differently. I know that in our job, a lot of the hard physical work, it's like, yeah, guys can muscle through a lot of things and we have to finesse it, like running toboggans in difficult terrain. It's like, you can't just muscle through it. It's like, oh, you use the chain brake, you do this, whatever works for you, and it takes practice. But, I think that all of us gals know that we have the tools, they're going to be different than the male tools, but if they work for us, it's all that matters. And if we get to the same end result,
Yeah.
I don't know.
I feel like I've felt it, maybe not from colleagues or coworkers, but from clients. Like for sure, they're like, oh, I have the girl guide, and so then you feel like now I have to, like, right out of the gates, I have to earn their trust and their belief that I can be, that they didn't just like pull the crapola card, that they got the sparkliest card out there and we're gonna have a great time, but it's usually that I have to prove that I have the technical skill set as good as, all the other guides that, went out already. And a lot of times, like, especially, I've gotten it heli ski guiding, I've gotten it backpack guide, I wilderness guide in the summer. And it's often the clientele that you have to and I think that's just taken me years to let go of the need for everybody to like me. That's taken forever. Because there's going to be some people that just won't, and that's they're missing out. And that's fine, but that's taken me forever because I found myself chameleoning or trying to be something that they were looking for, or trying to be the dude, I'll just row twice as many people in my boat or whatever it was. And instead of just being me. And that's just come with age, I think. It's just like, finally, I'm just like, this is what you get. And if you can't see that I'm a confident, amazing person that you get to share time with in the mountains, and that's your loss, and I'm sorry for you. But that's taking me, I can't go to that place every day. And I feel like it's really been hard for me. And it's happened to me in certifications too, I guess, feeling like the only female going for a cert or in a class, feeling like I had to keep up with the 25-year-old men in the class and be, twice as fit and never complain and, be their earliest and stay their latest. And, and that's still grinds at me in certain circles, for sure. It's a struggle.
I like that you talked about bringing your authentic self to your role as a guide, and that once you became really comfortable with that, suddenly a lot of doors were open. And you said like this year you've been on several podcasts and featured in multiple articles, and that now that you're comfortable in your true authentic self, you feel like the world is seeing you as well for that, which is awesome.
It's been an amazing year for me. I just feel like, in the sense, like, oh my God, I've arrived, there's still more places to go, obviously, but I've felt like I'm just like, one of these kids just doesn't belong here. One of these kids just isn't the same. Like, I felt like that my entire career. Like, I've just been like, and a lot of it because it was that male dominated space, but just like, I didn't fit in with that, and what it used to be, we would call the masculine style of guiding, but like authoritative and directive and like serious all the time. And I didn't see myself reflected in any other leaders. And so I really I was just drowning in insecurity. And it took mentors like Jenna and Melis and so many women in this community, Lynn Wolf, to really just be like, you are the only one standing in your own way, just be you. And it's taken like all of you women and so many women and so many men bopping me over the head over and over again, just be you. And I feel like as soon as I finally could listen to that, then all of a sudden everybody's like, oh, you're in Free Skier magazine, and we're gonna write about your style of like the other side of extreme, and like, oh, Brooke Edwards just likes to take people to the mountains and ski whoop-de-pie and take pictures because she loves taking people to the wilderness and seeing their light bulbs go off, and I'm just like, oh, really? I made Free Skier magazine and my tagline was the other side of extreme. I'm like, yes. So great.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, and I think, you and Melis, I know, have shared, you were talking about a New York Times study from several years ago that was just looking at how there have been data sets of looking at how girls often outperform boys in school in this sort of, I guess, dictated or regimented step-by-step process where it's like, if you do this, then you can get an A. And then in the career world, there is a lot more, I guess, fake it till you make it, or people encouraged to do so. And, unfortunately, that doesn't tend to be something that women do naturally. And I'm not sure that they should either. I mean, I think if you have confidence, overconfidence, of course, and especially in the Avalanche world, as we were saying earlier, then that can get you or your clients or coworkers into trouble. And so there's certainly a balance there. Malice, do you remember sending that article to Brooke?
Yeah, I remember sharing it with a bunch of my, female coworkers, only because it was shared with me, how women excel in this academic setting, and you study with like 4 different highlighter pens, and you got all your Post-it notes, and you're going to get 100 is achieving. And then, like 80's passing everybody. And that's certainly when you're a busy person, you can't get 100 on everything. So that's why it doesn't work in the workplace. Right. And so, just having realistic expectations for ourselves, knowing what projects are worth failing on, or maybe not overachieving on, and which ones are the ones that are worth putting all your energy in, because you're prioritizing everything at the same level and having realistic expectations for yourself. I don't know, could be a stereotype. Seems a lot harder with my female coworkers and colleagues than other genders. So.
All right, Roz, or not Roz. Oh yeah, go ahead, Roz.
Oh, just on a response to the question that was asked, I do feel like a lot of times people are more critical of me in my role, and that sometimes my voice isn't always heard, and it makes me have to be more assertive to have my voice be heard. And part of this, like an example of this, is just like being at the VEASAN booth and being the only one there and having the VEASAN logo, but maybe there's like a man there who's looking at the brochures, and then the person who comes up to ask questions about VEASAN usually goes and talks to the man who doesn't even work for VEASAN, versus like talking to the VEASAN professional that is wearing the logo. So I think it's just like we have these stereotypes in our brains that we all have, and we're not immune to them. But sometimes when they come forward, they aren't accurate, and just being aware that this does happen, and having these kind of conversations, and taking a moment to think about that. And if it does happen, being like, oh, I did that, and how can I think about that and be aware of it next time? So that's something that comes up a lot, I think, with people who are underrepresented in whatever industry.
That's a great example. I could share countless stories about being in the hospital, and the young male med student is asked how things went instead of the middle-aged female surgeon. So yeah, I think there are still a lot of assumptions, but I'm just looking at, I think we have, let's see, a question here. Let's see. Oh, I don't think I can see it, however. Oh, let's see. Okay. It's our collective responsibility to drive cultural change across this industry. However, men need to take the lead and be good allies. This includes monitoring the language we use, and not only in the presence of women and non-cisgender. The locker room talk, in quotes, locker room talk, can really get on a runaway in certain settings, and it shouldn't be the woman in the room who is responsible for calling out the inappropriate comments. Anything the panel has seen that works well to diffuse that awkwardness. And that's a great comment and question from Sean Zimmerman Wall. Thank you, Sean. And it's a great transition actually into our next topic, which is allyship. So I would love for you all to respond. Melis, do you want to go first?
Yeah, it's interesting. Well, I know we're going to talk about mentors too, and I think about who's helped me in my career, and if like Brooke, it's like an enormous list of people. So it took so many people to lift me up, to give me this skill and experience and confidence to take on the roles that I have. I've always like paid a little extra attention when that positive feedback or those opportunities or that encouragement came from men. I felt like overall, maybe men are stingier with compliments. And so maybe this is a fault of my own, but it's almost like I weighed those things more, which is probably not good and it probably isn't healthy, but it just says that that's important to women that you see are new in a career or emerging. Because there is a tipping point. There is a point, you get older in life and you care a little less, you're proving yourself a little less, you feel like you have legs to stand on and experience, and that grows, but that doesn't exist for a while, especially in a really physical space like Brooke was explaining, like in guiding, where like tit for tat, this athletic event is being compared. And I would say in like most sports, recreational sports, guiding, it's not that uneven. It's kind of at an elite level where you're going to see those differences, but you feel like as, a woman, you have to prove yourself more. I definitely remember early in my guiding career, taking more than my fair share of stuff to prove it. And I remember having male coworkers like lift my backpack to see if it weighed the same or less or more than theirs, or how did my rope team compare in speed to another rope team? And I would outdo it. I'd always try to be faster than the guys. I'd try to carry more. I'd do all this stuff. And luckily my back survived that pretty inappropriate behavior. That's not professional at all. I could have hurt myself. It's not safe. It doesn't make any sense, but that's there. And it's probably there for a lot of young women. So to make a point of letting everybody know when unfair behaviors are happening, like if a client is picking up a female guy's backpack to see how much it weighs, it'd be nice if she didn't have to call him out if a coworker did. Giving a woman roles and responsibilities that maybe other people aren't expecting. If you think that's going to be a challenge or they're nervous about it, briefing them on that. That's the kind of things that are really going to help your workplace be much more healthy and diverse, I think.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think, especially if you want to be an ally and you're a more experienced colleague, like coaching your less experienced and less represented female coworker is just an awesome way to do it. Roz, I thought when you and I talked about this, you had a really great strategy or tip for people and I would say kind of specifically addressing Sean's comment about locker room talk, when you were talking about visualizing standing up for someone or practicing it. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so I think that if you're a person who looks different from people around you, unfortunately, you've probably encountered some sort of discrimination towards you. And I think we can all think of examples of that. And if you look like everyone around you, you might have heard someone make a comment or do an action that is derogatory or discriminatory, and maybe something uncomfortable was said, or maybe it was more discreet than that, like picking up the woman's backpack of the group. And as a victim of this, it is hard to stand up for yourself in the moment. And if you do, you are commonly viewed as being defensive instead of standing up for yourself. And as an ally, if you witness this, it's also hard to stand up in the moment. But what I would encourage everyone to do is to think about this and think about a theoretical situation like this. For example, if you witness someone saying something discriminatory or hurtful, think about that sort of situation and how you would respond. and what you'd want to say in that moment. And this way, if you find yourself in that situation, it's easier to stand up and say something because you've already put yourself in that place. And also too, it doesn't have to be overly confrontational. Maybe sometimes it should be, but it could also be a question or just asking to have a conversation more about it.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. And just like Melis was talking about, challenging yourself with the communication styles that you aren't, you don't find natural necessarily, and trying to practice them. I think if you do really want to be an ally, just kind of picturing those situations so that you have some sense of comfort if they do come up. And yeah, I think not necessarily shaming the person if you're able to is good. Just trying to, as you said, not necessarily make it confrontational, but to really try to show yourself as an ally. Brooke, do you have thoughts on that?
Yeah, I had listened to a podcast that was a bunch of women guides talking about this exact same thing. And Roz, there was a woman who said that was the first I'd heard of that too, is like she called it her canned response, because she'd had that happen so much, and she like was always just like deer in the headlights when it happened to her. And then she was like, so I came up with this canned response that was just like, that was inappropriate, and that made me feel uncomfortable, and she said it in a very like non-aggressive way, but just like very simple. And she practiced it. And I just remember that making such an impact on me of like, wow, I'm gonna just keep repeating that and practice that and try to use that as my canned response, because it's like this easy and it's simple and it's professional. And nobody, like your boss, hopefully would stand up behind you, and say like, yeah, that was completely appropriate to say. And then from the allyship side of things, I've had male colleagues also, it can be a tool when it's appropriate, is using humor. So for instance, in Melis's example of like, if a client's over there weighing her back, or I've had multiple clients like ask to feel my biceps, and to have a male colleague be like, do you want to feel mine? Like, I row the same boat, like, just like they can, use humor to like make the whoever asked, feel a little bit ridiculous, or like, yeah, I guess I wouldn't have asked that to or just saying that, like, would you ask that to a male guide? Like, just to say that in, kind of a playful way of like playful calling out, but enough to be like, where all the, if it's a group of, like what I've seen, if it's a group of guys traveling together, all of the rest of the guys will be like, oh, you got called out, and so then it's, it's playful, but you're acting on it right away, and you're keeping rapport, but you're also letting them know that that's not appropriate.
Yeah, I love that story about having a bicep ally. That's pretty sweet. Tina, do you can you think of a time when you've I would imagine you have countless. You've already talked so much about how you have a great team. So I'm guessing that you feel like you have a lot of allies in your ski patrollers.
I do, for sure. And I've definitely had uncomfortable conversations, and I'm definitely getting good at having uncomfortable conversations. But, when things come up, it's just, asking questions like, where did that come from? Why do you feel that way? But also the joking, like Brooke said, it's like, that's one thing that I learned when, I know we'll talk about mentorship, but when I first started ski patrolling, the gal that was my coach, she taught me to laugh a lot of that stuff off and just like put the joke back on them and just be like, yeah, so what do you think about that? And just making a joke that maybe makes them think about what they're saying, and maybe helping people realize to speak unto others as you would have, or how you would have spoken to you or acted towards you. So that's what I've been trying to live by. It's like, okay, what would I say or act towards someone in a way that I would want to be acted towards or spoken to? So
yeah, that's great. Yeah, I think humor can go a long way for sure. And it's just great to feel supported also. Roz, you talked about having a really great mentor in one of your bosses. I think it was Sam Beeson. Is that right? Can you talk a little bit, or not, well, mentor, but also ally, I think.
Yeah, so it's a little bit hard in my line of work because nobody in the US has ever done this job before. And however, I have learned a lot from people that I've worked with in the industry and also the team members that I work with. And Sam Beeson was the CEO of Beeson Avalanche Control, and unfortunately he passed away in 2020 in a small plane crash. And we miss him very much, but he was, I think, all this talk of leadership, he was somebody who really embodied great leadership. He was a really good listener, and he would travel to different countries where Beeson subsidiaries were set up, and he would really take the time to get to know the people in the industry and his coworkers there, and like really take time to learn from people there and to embrace different cultures in different places. And he really trusted and empowered his team and gave people the ability to make their own decisions while being really supportive. So he was a good mentor to me.
Awesome, and it sounds like a great ally as well. And I think, it's awesome that we had an audience member ask about, how to be an effective ally. And that was someone who identifies as male asking about, allyship for people who identify as female. But I think it's really important also just to talk about allyship amongst each other as well, because women are still pretty underrepresented in the industry. I think it's really important to feel like we're lifting each other up, and I think all the panelists would agree. I don't know if anyone wants to comment on that.
Yeah, I would just say I have another coworker, Lisa Dreyer, who works for Beeson Canada, and she does an awesome job working up there. And we have started to have monthly or biweekly conversations, and I've just learned a lot from the projects that she has going up there and from this knowledge exchange. And I think it's been really helpful for us to have these meetings.
Cool, awesome. And unless anyone else has a comment, I think I'll have Janie bring up our allyship poll. And we have two questions regarding allyship. Do you feel supported by your male colleagues? Yes, most of the time, sometimes. No, not usually. And then we have a second question. Oh, sometimes. Okay, so looks like we have some room to improve here. Yes, most of the time, 38%. Okay, and then the second question. Do you feel supported by your female colleagues? Yes, most of the time, sometimes. No, not usually. I'm really hoping this is going to be high. I probably shouldn't say that until everyone submitted their answer, so I don't sway the audience feedback. 64%. Okay, so a bit better, but still room to improve. Okay. All right. Okay. So let's move on to mentorship. And I know we've already had some questions from audience members asking you all to share stories about your mentors or an example of a mentor. And I know for all of us, this has been a pretty critical part of our early career and getting to, as Melis put it, that tipping point where you feel that you've established yourself as an Avalanche professional. So Brooke, can you talk about one of your mentors?
Gosh, there's I have so many mentors. Yeah, including this panel. So it's just like, oh, but yeah, Melis, because she's sitting right here, is like a great example to me of like one of my mentors. Like in not just all things Avalanche, like I think Melis invited me on a Denali rescue patrol one year when she knew I was like heading down the AMGA path and knew that I had a lot of insecurity about rope systems. And, you know, I'd had an incident back in the mountains becoming a Knowles mountaineering instructor like 20 years ago. That was really traumatic to me. And I like, it took me out of the mountaineering realm like for 20 years. And I was just like dipping my toe back in. And I mean, Melis that year, like she had two ways that she like basically like invited me into a staffing director role at the Alaska Avalanche School. So that was amazing. Just like seeing that I had the skills, and I hadn't thought about that, but just her mentorship and coaching like allowed me to feel like it was a safe place to try out this role and be a lead within the Avalanche education world and like push my skills in that behind the scenes sort of way. And it was through her coaching and encouragement that I even like was intrigued by that job and took that job. And then throughout 2 years of doing that job under her leadership, like just really like kept learning and kept growing. And it was a role that I would never ever necessarily put my name in the hat for, because I didn't think I was ready, but she believed I was ready. And because of that, it like launched me the next step. And then she invited me on that rescue patrol when she knew I was like, she knew it would mean too that perhaps that I'd be like pursuing these little bit more guiding dreams and like take the job at Valdez, and that she would lose me on the staff of the Avalanche School perhaps, but she still took that risk of like pushing me out of the nest. And I'm really grateful for that, Melis, and invited me into an element that she knew was like fear triggering to me and trauma inducing to me, to like go back into a crevasse rescue world when I almost died in a crevasse fall a million years ago. And she created this safe space for me that was so much fun. And she created an all women's team that was on a base camp rescue patrol, and it was sunny and glorious. And we spent every day, all day working through rope systems and doing fun ascents and descents. And like, she just like reignited that joy back into the mountains for me. And then that helped me like push me like on the starting path down that AMGA track. And so Melis, I just like, for me, like that was life-changing, those two events, like in very different paths, but both of which you knew, like you were like, you know, you saw my potential when I couldn't see it, and really like created a safe space and worked with my style of learning, which is very much like, especially when I've had trauma in the past, like you created a space for me that allowed me to not like, you know, you didn't throw me off the boat and expect me to swim. Like you gave me a progression that gave me the bite-sized pieces that allowed me to work through the stress, injury, and baby step my way back into a love of the mountains in a new environment that now I'm continuing that path on, you know? So yeah, thank you, Melis. I mean, I'm full of gratitude for you, you know, and you, you know, I could have a speech like that for so many women, but it's just fun to have you here in the room to be able to thank you side by side on a Zoom.
Yay. That is awesome. Tina, can you share a story about your mentor or mentors?
Well, yeah, I was thinking about it today, actually, when I was walking up Chickadee, walking home. And, you know, my mom, when I told her one summer that I was going to live in a van and work on the river, and she was like, I want to live in a van and work. So she was fully supportive of my transient lifestyle. So I have her to thank for that for sure. And then, like I was mentioning earlier, Karen Davis, she was my coach when I was a rookie at Breckenridge. And she showed me all the ins and outs of being a patroller and working with men and learning how to finesse things that we couldn't just muscle through, and how to laugh a lot and still work really hard and have fun and still help people, and attention to detail, and, you know, take pride in what we're doing. And to be comfortable in our own skin. And I think that's really important. And that, you know, I feel more comfortable some days than others in my skin, but I'm getting there. But I think that was a really important tool that she gave me. So, and I don't know if that's just, you know, trusting our instincts and trusting that we do have the capabilities to do these jobs that have been for so long male dominated, you know? So
Yeah,
it's nice to see that change.
that's so important. I know when I've acted as a mentor, if I try to build my mentee up, you know, rather than, as you were saying, Brooke, being thrown off the boat and expected to swim, but rather set them up for success in a way that you are helping that person to feel comfortable in their own skin. You're basically showing that you have confidence in their ability. And Roz, as you said, you're you know, giving your mentees the opportunity to make mistakes. But I think if you you know, Melis, you talked about how words of affirmation you know, can really help women in the workplace. I think help anyone in the workplace, of course, but I think that for myself, if I'm approaching a task from a place of feeling like the people around me believe I can do it and I'm capable, I'm gonna be better. Like I'm gonna shine more when I feel like people already believe in me. So Roz, can you talk about mentorship a little bit?
Well, I really appreciated what you just said. And I think it's really important as a mentor or as a leader too, to give ownership and responsibility to the members of your team and let team members learn in the moment. And as long as you're not putting lives in danger, which in this line of work is a consideration. But if you let your team members make decisions, even if mistakes are made, your team will be stronger for it because your team members are trusted and empowered and they're learning and engaged, and it's going to make your whole team stronger.
Awesome. Yeah, absolutely. And that's the goal, right? Is really a collective improvement. You know, that saying, a rising tide lifts us all. Malice, congratulations on being Brooke's named mentor. I feel like we're on a talk show, and I'm like, Malice, you're the winner, the winning mentor. Will you talk to us about one of your mentors?
Yeah, and is the blush off my cheeks? I'm pretty honored. And just to follow up, you know, Brooke, I hadn't heard that before. That means a lot to me. That's an enormous compliment. But I think a really healthy mentor-mentee relationship isn't really uneven. I think to get the interest out of a really good mentor, they're hoping to get things out of you, you know, either traits they don't have, you're fresher in the field, you've experienced that, like that curriculum or that field in a new way. And so a really good relationship between a mentor and a mentee is two ways. So I could spend some time making Brooke blush of all the things that I've learned and grown and from her, and all the ways she's made our organization like enduringly better. But you know, I think a lot of people have this idea that a mentor is this master Yoda in your life. It's this person on the pedestal and everything goes to them. And it's this one person I'm going to call for every problem. And I would say it's worthwhile, like taking pen to paper and writing down all the people that you consider mentors or somebody you would go to for professional advice, your friends who you'd go to for personal advice, and keep those things separate. You wouldn't want one person to wear more than one hat or put somebody in a conflict, or ask somebody that also maybe worked at your organization about something that might be controversial. And so I'd say it's like a good exercise to maybe think through those things when you're in a position where you need to bounce an idea off someone, or you need to be vulnerable, ask a question, process a mistake, like think through those people were. And hopefully it's more than one person. I would say definitely don't put all your eggs in a basket, and you're going to need different things at different parts of your career. Also, having people out of your career field is really refreshing, because they can let you know about all the biases or the things that are embedded into your world that cloud your judgment and things that don't make sense. So that's just really generic advice, but I've just really, as a lot of these people here in the panel that I really admire, I feel like I'm learning just so much from everybody in this conversation. But yeah, just have a deep bench of people that you can go to work on things for different elements of your career, because that's really benefited me. And that involves like reaching out, and you don't know how someone's going to receive it. And maybe they don't receive it well. It's not a rejection, but it's also a big time commitment. They might not have the time or the space to do it. So have a little bit of a thick skin, and it involves reaching out like a lot. And sometimes hearing no, people don't have the time to give you advice or the space, or you try and they give you really lame advice and it's not that helpful, and you just go a different direction.
Yeah, I think a great example of that kind of symbiosis where, your mentor is going to expect something from you is, I know sometimes the forecasters for our local forecast office will go out with observers and actually challenge them to try to help them with writing the forecast the next day. So a good mentor, I think, will challenge you. And I think your suggestions about going outside of your specific field are really useful. So we have a question from someone I think we all know, Dave Richards. As the male head of an Avalanche program, which employs a team of incredible female Avalanche workers, I agree, they are incredible. How do I mentor them into leading the boys and away from a quiet minority? You all know me, so gloves off. Have at it, ladies. no one's touching that with a turquoise wall. Tina, you're a patrol director. I mean, how do you feel like you've I know that I guess you're not tasked necessarily with specific assignments on routes necessarily, but have you found ways, or do you have any suggestions for, I think this comes down to both mentorship and allyship, right?
Totally. I was out on a route this morning with Johnny B, who I hadn't been out on a route with in a while. And, just talking through it and, expressing what I saw, what plan A would be, what plan B would be, and just having that dialogue and feeling comfortable with that. And I think it's just being comfortable with your team, male or female, and just not tiptoeing around anything and just being like, this is what I think, this is what I'm seeing, what do you think? And just having an honest conversation. And I know I've talked to you about this, Jenna. It's like, and maybe this is naive, but we're all human. It doesn't matter if we're male or female or black or white or whatever our gender identity is. We're all humans, and just to realize that and not make it an us or them. It's just to be one big patrol team. We like to joke, or I like to joke about it, is that we're just one big happy dysfunctional family, and we all have our quirks, and we might not all ask each other for dinner every night or every week or whatever, but we learn to work with each other professionally, respectfully, and yeah, treat each other as brothers and sisters. And there's always some good banter.
Yeah.
But I think just to have that, like, think of it that way, like we're all in the Avalanche community. We're all here for the same reasons, to ski powder like we did today. And just work for that, towards that common goal.
Mhm.
Right. I think,
Oh,
go
sorry.
ahead.
Oh.
Who
I
is
was
that?
going to say, to piggyback on what Tina was saying, is just that I do feel like if you think about it, of like, there's going to be more outspoken, like I'm female, but I'm pretty easy to be outspoken. So, but then there's men and women who just have a quieter way of like, they need to think longer on a problem, and they're not going to be the first person to speak up. And so creating a space that either asks for everybody's input or leaves space, which can sometimes feel uncomfortable, to just be like, is like kind of like asking that question, is there something we missed? You know, is there anyone else who has a different perspective? Or just saying, Tina, I haven't heard from you today. Like, what are your thoughts on this route? Or, you know, so sometimes you have to actually carve out space for that person, whether they're male or female. And so Grom, maybe for you as a leader, is just like, I know with doing routes, everything's like timing, and you've got, you know, you're under this pressure gun and everything. So a lot of it could be in that debrief portion of the day, or even, you know, earlier in the day. It's just like making sure you have that buy-in from each person, and the people that you're seeing aren't feeling comfortable speaking up, like carve out a little niche for them to be able to have their voice heard.
And I think,
Yeah.
I think the fact that you're just asking the question is great, right? You're trying to promote the less represented group in a way that you can, and again, kind of coaching or commenting on what your workers are doing well is going to be really helpful and encouraging for them. Yeah, Roz, did you have a comment?
Yeah, well, I was just gonna say, for me personally, and I can't speak for all female identifying people, but I like to be treated the exact same. My dad has been a big influence in my life, and growing up, he was always like, help me carry this heavy thing, or here's how you light a fire. And so I've always, I get really annoyed if people are like, hey, you're the dude, so you're gonna help me carry this heavy thing, and you're not going to, or like, I don't really want to be treated in any different way. I want to just be given the same roles, same responsibilities. And, you know, that's different for everybody too. And I think maybe it's worth kind of echoing what other people are saying, just having that conversation like, hey, how do you see yourself in the workspace? And what roles do you want to take on or not take on? Or how do you want me to communicate with you? Just having that conversation with people up front.
Yeah, those are great suggestions. Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, some people want and need to have that space created for them, and others, you know, just want to consider themselves part of that large dysfunctional family. Melis, what are your thoughts on this?
The times I feel like I've been better integrated into a mostly or completely male work environment. I had people take me aside one-on-one and prep me for a skill, so that when I came to the entire group, it wasn't them watching me do a new skill for a new time. I had been coached a bit so that I could take over that responsibility and you know, have some confidence and earn people's trust. I think it's also important to invite people into spaces they wouldn't normally. So I don't actually know the structure of like a ski resort at all, but like if you're having some level of meeting, that's not all the patrollers, but you're with some level of management or a patrol director at another resort that would normally be like head to head. Women don't get a lot of that experience to see what that upper level leadership looks like. And so invite one of your talented female coworkers, if you think she's deserving, to that conversation, even have her present or contribute ideas or participate in some things it's like one notch above where they're at right now, but they can see where they want to go and where they want to be.
Awesome. Thank you, Melis. We have a question in the chat that I'm going to read. Sometimes we find that women find competition amongst each other when there are fewer of us. Do any of the panelists have experience and or suggestions in changing that environment to one that is more of support than competition? And note that we do support healthy competition when it's due. So, Brooke, do you want to start with that one?
I think, yeah, I feel like I haven't run into this in a really long time, but I definitely struggled at it. I feel like in my younger years, when you're just kind of like just first poking your nose into the field of outdoor guiding, or you're new patroller, or you're fresh on the scene, and then there's I remember that feeling very well, like showing up to Alaska and having been hired to be a lead guide in the summer and never having been here, and I got there and there was 3 other what I'd call girls at that time. We're all like in our 20s and we felt very much like girls, but young women, and I just, well, I instantly did A, imposter syndrome, but then B, yeah, just like felt that kind of like rivalry for space. And I think it, if you're sensing that from someone else, like now I have the wisdom to say, like, to take a big breath and settle into a place of compassion and empathy, to be like, usually that energy is coming from a place of insecurity. And so then I'm like, okay, that insecurity is because they're probably feeling imposter syndrome. So how can I like bridge that gap and break down that barrier and just have a conversation? And maybe it is just an invitation of like, hey, let's go do this route together. Let's do you want to, grab a drink after work and like, debrief that day? That was rough. Are you struggling? And then show some kind of vulnerability to be like, are you struggling with these things? Like, I'd love help with rope skills. I hear you're really good at that, so it's like, if you just like reach a hand over that bridge and, show some vulnerability and some compassion, then, it's been a rare occasion that I haven't been met, at that place. And then these like walls of like, okay, we're in this, it just breaks apart that like, okay, we're not rivaling each other. We can be on like a strong sisterhood together, and we can actually boost and buoy each other up. But a lot of it took some like self-work and that like getting past ego, I guess. And that does come easier with age, but we all have the capacity to be compassionate, empathetic beings, because we've all felt that sense of insecurity, and that not knowing if we belong or not knowing if we're enough. And so we can certainly see it in other people. And there's always a way to like reach that helping hand out in a really like, positive way.
That's great advice. And I do think that once we get to that proverbial tipping point that Melis talked about, I'm going to keep coming back to that term, Melis, I love it, that it is easier certainly to feel compassion and also excitement about seeing other women coming up in this industry, which is something I think that we have all felt and are super stoked about, Tina, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, every year we hire a few more gals on the patrol, and it's just so nice to go out and ski around with them and, see where they're at and their strengths. And, I learn something every day. And it's great because, I mean, when I was growing up and first into the whole patrol scene, and I mean, it was mostly guys, and you just learn to deal with it and hear whatever they're going to talk about. It's like, oh, whatever, blow it off. So it's really fun to have a bunch of gals around and just go out and ski and have fun and talk about non-boy stuff. And maybe it is boy stuff, but it's not like male dominated conversation.
Awesome. We just have, I think, well, I was going to say we have a minute left, but I think we're actually at 8 o'clock. So Melis or Roz, if you have any thoughts on that to share, you want to chime in quickly?
Oh, one thought is that I do think that there's someone in this world who does a really good job of empowering other women and other underrepresented people, and that person is Beyonce. And I would encourage you all to listen to Flawless, because there's a quote in there that's really good about this. So I'll just leave you with that.
Awesome. Melis, anything else to add?
I was just doing a quick note on, and Brooke touched on this earlier. I just think it's such an important point that women, certainly, especially older women, can be harder on younger women that are coming up than is due. She mentioned it, just because you had to fight harder or prove yourself or do things that were kind of unreasonable to get the same positions or access to power doesn't mean all the people below you do. And so it's not like a healthy rite of passage at all. Being competent and interested and showing up and being professional is good enough. So I know as an employer, I have to self-check on that and kind of understand that. I really appreciate Brooke bringing that up. And I know that was a question in one of the comments.
Yeah, we've had really thought-provoking questions, and I think it's just, you know, as I said, I think we're also excited to see more women in the industry, and we really appreciate allyship from both our female and male colleagues, and I think conversations like this one can only help all of us. So thank you all so much for coming tonight. I had such a good time seeing you all virtually. I wish we were all sitting around a table together, and I look forward to the time when we can do that again. And I hope everyone stays happy and healthy. And thank you so much to the American Avalanche Association. I think I would be remiss to not mention, of course, that we are thinking about the war in Eastern Europe, and our thoughts go to the people of Ukraine, and hope that everyone can see more peaceful days soon.
Thanks, Jenna.
Thank you for moderating, Jenna.
Thank you, Jamie.
Thank you so much.
And before you all exit, I just wanted to note that this webinar has been recorded. So for those tuning in, we will share it via email next week. So you'll have a recording to share with friends or colleagues you think this might benefit. And we will also probably include some fun resources that we talked about here tonight as well. So thank you for tuning in, and thank you to this panel. This was awesome. Just thank you so much. So more to come. Have a great evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jamie.